Genau. Ich sage vielleicht hallo, willkommen erstmal. Ich sage mal kurz für die Leute im Saal die Orga-Dinge. Wer eine Übersetzung auf Englisch braucht, kann sich hier vorne so ein schickes Übersetzungsgerät holen und das ins Ohr bekommen und dann, genau, eine Übersetzung von Deutsch auf Englisch. Von Englisch auf Deutsch. Ja, sorry, danke. Von Englisch auf Deutsch. Hab ich doch gesagt auf Deutsch. Genau. Ich weiß nicht, was ich gesagt habe. Egal. Von Englisch auf Deutsch, die könnt ihr bekommen. Irina und Stefan sind so nett zu übersetzen für uns. Genau. Und das ist wichtig. So I just said that there is a translation device from English to German, whoever needs it. And that is important. So welcome everybody. Welcome everybody also on the Zoom meeting. And welcome everybody in the Hörsaal, in the lecture room of Humboldt University. I'm very pleased to announce my colleague and very esteemed Romani feminist, Justyna Matkowska. Before I do that, though, I still have one organizational thing, which is we will take pictures for our social media and public work. Whoever does not want a picture should, so Yunus is the one taking pictures. He has the camera here. People on the Zoom might not be able to see him. And if you don't want your picture to be taken, please raise your hand now so Yunus can make sure he doesn't take pictures of you. Okay, so everybody is okay with that. Thank you so much. So today's talk is the last of our series in this year, and the title is The Plight of Roma and Sinti Women, Sexual Violence During World War II in Occupied Poland. Justyna Matkowska is not only I know her from our political group that we're in, the Romani Feminist Gender Experts Collective, but also I know her from the work that we are doing right now in our project on Alfreda Noncia Markowska. There will be a theater play next year, and we will very heartily, warmly invite you to come over. And there will also be a didactic material, and you have been our historical brain behind that, and I'm very grateful to see your very diligent and also ethical work that you were giving us. And but I also want to share, of course, the credentials, the things that you did. So you earned your Ph.D. from the University of Wroclaw, and you hold an MA in literary studies from the same university. Justyna Matkowska also completed the Postgraduate Romani Studies Program at the Pedagogical University of Krakow in Poland and has an MBA degree from the Collegium Humanum, Warsaw Management University. She focuses in her research on the Holocaust of Roma and Sinti, Roma feminism, as well as anthropology, race and ethnicity, cultural memory, and the representation of Romani people. I will not take any more of your time, and I'm grateful to have you here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, guten Abend, Lacio Dives Romale, Lacio Dives Romnja and Sintice. Thank you, Heidi, for the very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to each and every of you for joining us this afternoon, both in person and online. I hope my students from U Albany are also with us and they're earning their extra credits right now. And thank you for taking your time, especially during this busy pre-Christmas period and also the COVID. I saw many students in Berlin already leaving, so I know that everybody is right now thinking about Christmas already. I would like to also thank the Romani Pen organization for inviting me to participate in this series of lectures. Special thanks goes to Svetlana, Isidora, Heidi, Jane for their warm hospitality and great organization. I personally flew here from beautiful Hawaii. a journey that took me over 24 hours. And this also shows my commitment to this project. I have had pleasure of enjoying Berlin, and I have brought 3 American companions with me. They're sitting there. And one of them is my dear friend Iris, a Native American woman from Navajo tribe. And it's very important to recognize and remember that the experiences of Native American women in many areas parallel with Romani women. And Iris, I'm very delighted to have you here, and I'm very grateful for your friendship and your support. Yeah. Okay, so before we move on, I would like to highlight the concept that the concept presented in this lecture constitute an integral part of my article, which is currently under the review in the Journal of Holocaust Research. So I would like to kindly request refraining from using or citing this material until the publication process is complete. Okay. In my lecture, I'll focus on the topic of sexual and gender-based violence against Roma and Sinti women and girls in occupied Poland during World War II. I will start by explaining why I decided to research this topic. So during my research on Roma and Sinti resistance in Auschwitz-Birkenau, as a part of my research fellowship at Mandel Center at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, I encountered numerous accounts describing the sexual and gender-based violence against Roma and Sinti women and girls. And these stories and testimonies really stuck with me. And for some time, I could not stop thinking about these women and their experiences. And as a result, these testimonies serve as the inspiration for this study. I analyzed the cases mentioned in the testimonies of Sinti and Roma survivors collected between 1997 and 1998 by USC Shoah Foundation. And in total, I examined 181 testimonies. As you see at this slide, there are the pictures from the Auschwitz. First is the woman, second is the man. I actually analyzed testimony of the man's wife, and she was taking care of orphans in Poland, and that's very, very sad story. And these pictures are available at the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum website. But even though we have memorial here, beautiful memorial of Sinti and Roma victims in Berlin, for decades after the war, the Nazi genocide of Roma and Sinti, referred as Samudaripen, remain on the margins of the Holocaust discourse. Furthermore, the fate of Roma and Sinti women and girls, particularly their experiences of violence, has been ignored. And the prominently patriarchal nature of the Holocaust historiography played a significant role in marginalizing violence against female victims, with sexual violence being a particularly taboo subject that women and girls were discouraged from openly discussing. Cultural taboos within Romani communities regarding sexuality and practices with sexual connotations further hindered open debate about this issue. In Romani culture, woman modesty and virtue impact a family standing and dignity, which is why rape is often perceived as a shameful act, deeply shameful act. Addressing this topic of sexual violence is considered culturally forbidden within traditional Roma communities, as it can result in serious consequences for the victims, but also for their families, because the rape involves a man who is not women's husband. Due to these cultural taboos, as well as cultural factors, such as the need to protect the identities of Holocaust survivors, this presentation anonymize witnesses' testimonies using only the first names of the victims. Sometimes I'm going to also mention the group that victims were belonging. This approach respects my own cultural tradition as an author of Romani descent, and also acknowledges the Romani law and Romani pen code, which define our internal laws, including the moral values, customs, traditions, taboo prohibitions, and norms considering the intimate life. Oh, what happened?
It's the university's fault.
Oh. Actually, the next photo is a photo of my grandmother that I wanted to share with the okay. I actually can see it already on my screen, but not there.
Set up here.
Okay. Oh, no, it's only on my screen. Again. Should I?
Set up here for me.
Should I continue? Or? I think I clicked something. I mean, I wanted to change. That's not okay.
It happened to it before.
Okay. I tried to. Oh. So maybe that's the picture of my grandmother. Yes. Okay. Just the screen doesn't work, yeah. But it's. I can continue. So the objective of presenting these traumatic experiences of Roma and Sinti women and girls is purely for the research purposes, with no intent to cause offense to any Romani family. As a granddaughter of Holocaust survivor, as I seek to pay homage to all women who were victims of the sexual assault or rape during World War II. And I have pictures of women of my family, but I'm going to show it when. Let's hope that we will be able to see it soon. I want to also explain how I define a victim. So in my research, the concept of victim and survivor of Holocaust sexual violence in armed conflicts has long been debate within feminist discourse. And in my research, I adopt the definition of a victim as a person suffering for reasons unrelated to his or her own agency. The term victim especially pertains to a particular form of abuse, in line with the perspective articulated by Gudrun Dahl, which characterizes victims as generally lacking power, inner force, and responsibility. And victims, according to this definition, they do not actively shape their own history, and they are not participating in their own history. They are weak and passive. And in order to better understand the experience of Roma and Sinti women during World War II, I will briefly discuss the historical overview. But since we have already, we are able to see the pictures, I can. So that's my grandmother. That's her portrait. That is very important in my home. And this is also my grandmother on this picture with my grandfather and my grandfather brother and his wife. As you see, I'm from very traditional family with music traditions. And in the middle here is my great grandmother, who also survived the genocide and who was she was in forced labor camp. And her husband was murdered in Auschwitz. Here's a definition of the victim that I just discussed. And in case of the just quickly for the historical overview of Roma and so as we know, the Third National Socialist Party in the Third Reich pursued a final solution to the Gypsy question based on the racial grounds. So the same grounds they persecuted. Yes. What about this? Open, deny, or? Okay, is it working? Oh. Okay, so one more time. National Socialist Party in the Third Reich pursue a final solution to the Gypsy question based on the racial grounds, and Roma and Sinti encounter more than 94% of the forced sterilizations under the 1933 Nazi implemented law for the prevention of offsprings with the hereditary diseases. Then in 1945, the Nazi implemented the Nuremberg Law for the protection of German blood and German honor, which deprived Jews and also Roma and Sinti of German citizenship and stripped them of the basic rights and prohibited them from marrying Germans. Roma and Sinti were also subject of the research at the Berlin Institute for Research on Racial Hygiene and Population Biology, headed by Dr. Robert Ritter. The pseudo research aimed to classify so-called gypsies and explore the link between ethnicity and crime. On October 12, 1938, Heinrich Himmler issued a decree titled Combating the Gypsy Plague, which mandate the registration of Sinti and Roma and the issuance of new identity cards. And on October 17, 1939, Sinti and Roma were forbidden to leave their places of residence under the threat of imprisonment in the concentration camp. And in 1940, Nazi began deporting Roma and Sinti from Sinti and Roma in case of Germany and Roma and Sinti in case of Austria to ghettos and camps established in occupied Poland. In December 1942, Heinrich Himmler decreed the deportation of mixed blood gypsies, Gypsy Romas, and Balkan origin gypsies to concentration camps. It was a plan to establish the Romani family camp at Birkenau, so Auschwitz II. And according to available records and the newest research done by Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum, State Museum, more than 23,000 Roma individuals were, and Roma and Sinti individuals were in prison in Auschwitz. But it's really difficult to determine the exact number of the victims. And according to scholar Donald Kenrick, the symbolic number of the victims of the genocide of Roma and Sinti are at least 500,000. Roma and Sinti were persecuted in the ghettos, concentration camps, extermination camps, and in case of occupied Poland, many Roma were murdered in mass executions. And that's, actually this is, there are the pictures from May this year. And this is a funeral of remains of 22 Roma whose remains were found in the construction work in Poland in a town of Tarnogród. And according to research, the family was murdered in 1942, in May of 1942. There were 22 Roma killed at that place, and 2 women were pregnant. So that's the funeral. As you see, it was Catholic funeral because that's what the Roma community wanted, and that's the memorial. And there are more than 200 memorials across the Europe that commemorates the murdered Roma and Sinti, and that includes 36 memorials in Poland. But we have to remember that many graves, mass graves, are still unknown and uncommemorated. And there were 167 pogroms, according to post-war research. We don't know, maybe more than 167. This is again my women from my family. And in this slide, I would like to talk about rape and violence of women during World War II. As we know, wartime and reality of women living in war zones were terrible. And in the context of total war, sexual violence escalates as and was employed as a means to establish and assert the aggressor's authority and control. Throughout the gender analysis, we can comprehend how the widespread rape of women, often in the presence of their families, was wielded by persecutors to systematically destroy not only the individual victims, but also their families, groups, and communities. Sexual violence in the context of war was weaponized as a tool of genocide during World War II, with perpetrators employing gender-based strategies and processes to accomplish their objectives. Women in occupied territories, which were liberated later on, were in the constant fear of rape, sexual violence, and murder. Similar to other women, including Jewish women, German women, we all know the history of the Battle of Berlin, and Polish women, Romani women and Sinti women were also tragically fell victim of sexual abuse and violence. And considering the victimization of Romani women and gender issue and the authority of military personnel, the rape and attempted rape of Romani women emerged as a very harmful form of sexual violence during World War II. While the testimonies of Roma and Sinti Holocaust survivors, only few of them provide the exact information, and only few of them wanted to openly talk about their experience of rape and abuse. And in this part of presentation, I will discuss the accounts of sexual and gender violence against Roma and Sinti women and girls, as well as consequences for Romani women. And this analysis is centered on incidents of rape or attempted rape involving women, but committed by 3 distinct groups of perpetrators. So in my research, I found only 3 groups that 3 groups of military personnel that actually hurt Roma women, and among them were, of course, Ukrainian nationalism, Germans, and the Soviet soldiers who were advancing westward at the end of the war. And the cases of sexual and gender violence examined in my research occurred in the 3 distinct geographical regions within the Nazi-occupied Poland. The major cities such as Kielce, Rzeszów, Przemyśl, and Lublin, Carpathian mountain region, and Galicia and Volhynia area. And this is a map from 1942. And these regions and towns represent places where Roma lived or spent winter or sought refuge during World War II. And I will start with the topic of attempted rapes and gender-based violence by the Nazi Germans. There are several stories, but I'm going to only share a few of them. One testimony comes from Eva, who was a member of Polska Roma group, and she was subjected to forced agricultural labor in Nazi Germany. She experienced physical abuse, and she also suffered beatings from her employer, referred as a Bauer, which means farmer, and also his wife. But Eva also experienced sexual abuse from her employer. And tragically, the Bauer's wife was aware of her husband's actions and rapes, and unfortunately, it led to Eva's pregnancy. And shortly after liberation, Eva returned home and soon gave birth of her son. And she was married to Rom, and she raised a child with her Roma husband. But there are also stories of other women. A woman of the Kelderash group recounted the experiences of her family who sought refuge near Warsaw. She mentioned incident of her sister and another pregnant woman who were raped by the Nazi Germans. And here's a quotation from that. And I will quote, "We only hid there in the countryside. They were coming, raping there." And then she states, "And later at night they came and raped Romani women. They raped my sister, and they also raped someone who was pregnant." And so my mother always hid us because we were the youngest, so that they wouldn't rape us. So this narrative shed light on the terror experienced by Romani women and also desperate efforts of mothers to protect their children. Furthermore, among the testimonies of the male Romani survivors, there are accounts of attempted rape by the German soldiers. One such account comes from the eyewitness, Józef, and that's a very interesting story. So Józef family, they wanted to flee from Przemyśl to Czechoslovakia in order to escape persecution. And a German soldier saw their beautiful gray horse, and there he expressed desire to take their gray horse, and so he did. And later on, Roma needed the horse very badly because they wanted to flee from occupied zones, and they approached the Germans and requested to take their gray horse back. And So the family sent Józef and the Romani women to deal with this situation. And so they met with the Germans, and one soldier engaged in a conversation with Józef, and the other attempted to rape the young woman. And she screamed for help, prompting Józef to intervene and rescue her. And despite preventing the assault, Józef witnessed the torn clothes and the dire situation of Romani woman. German soldiers was embarrassed, so he provided the Romani woman with a needle and thread to mend her torn blouse and asked her to keep this incident as a secret. And following this situation, two soldiers helped Roma to get back their horse, so they could escape to Czechoslovakia. In contrast to that, there is one more story. There is a story of Carpathian Roma family, and on the other hand, they recounted very good experience with German soldiers. There is a Holocaust survivor. He states that the German soldiers would come to visit Roma and watch the Roma performances in the village every Sunday night. And these soldiers were not consuming any alcohol, and instead they were dancing with Romani women. And additionally, the senior officers would attend these gatherings and to make sure that everything was going smoothly and there are no situations that could embarrass them. So this survivor emphasized that Romani women were in the town were treated with respect by the German soldiers during these interactions. And the next group of the testimonies are testimonies describing the brutal violence endured by Romani and Sinti women by Ukrainian nationalists. And unfortunately, Polish Roma fell victim to these anti-Roma pogroms and also ethnic cleansing in Volhynia and Galicia between 1943 and 1947, and in some cases much earlier. We know that Einsatzgruppen actively participated in these executions, but most prominently in the Volhynia region, Roma were facing systemic persecution more from also the Ukrainian nationalists. And there was this difference between how the nationalists treat the Polish Roma and Ukrainian Roma. So they could recognize if Roma speak Ukrainian language, and then they could see them as their own Roma. Ukrainian Roma were safe, but the Polish Roma were unsafe. They were persecuted. And these stories of brutality of Ukrainian nationalists, including the organization of Ukrainian nationalists, Ukrainian Insurance Army, which was UPA, and Ukrainian Auxiliary Police faced by Romani women in Volhynia and Galicia area that appear in the testimonies are terrifying. There are the testimonies that I process the most, and they are very, very difficult to even watch. Woman who lost her mother in this incident was a Kardarash woman named Julia, and she revealed the attack on the Roma community right after the outbreak of the World War II. It was during the Easter of 1940, and 12 Roma, including her mother and mother's sisters, fell victim of brutal massacres at the hands of Ukrainian nationalists. And most likely they were civilians or members of the organization of Ukrainian nationalists. And she recounts, and I will quote, "My mother went to the countryside, and my sisters were there too, along with my aunts, and they were killed, murdered. There were 12 people killed. Women were raped, and then the Ukrainian oppressors cut off their breasts and tongues before killing them. Julia talks with anguish on her face about these traumatic memories. And she stated, "Sir, they cut off their tongues, pardon my language, they cut off their breast. They did such tortures. They raped my 2 sisters. They were just girls." The family was even not able to bury the bodies of the victims of these horrifying massacres due to the ongoing threat. So they decided to leave the area for their own safety. And they chose to travel to Lviv, and because they were afraid of their lives. Another story is a story of the woman named Maria, and she tells the story of her grandmother, who was very similarly tortured and murdered, and her oppressors cut her breast and then killed her and then throw her body in the ditch. These situations, these ritual mutilations, and they're very much related to the symbols related to the group's reproduction, such as cutting of the breast and tongues, exemplify what scholars refer to as life force atrocities. And this concept, introduced by scholar Elisa von Jodenforgey, encompasses ritualized patterns of violence that targets the life forces of a group by destroying both the physical symbols of its life force as well as its most basic institutions of reproduction, especially the family unit. The concept of life force atrocities underscores the suffering and trauma experienced by survivors and their families, as reflected in the testimonies of Roma survivors. Another tragic account comes from Maciej, who remembers a night when Roma were in the forest. It was night, rainy night, and they were attacked by Ukrainians who were looking for gold. And when they searched and they found nothing, because that Roma group was poor and it was war, they decided to rape a young Romani girl who was a virgin. So he stated, and I will quote, "They attacked us at night. We were in tents and it was raining quite heavily. And they were looking for gold, whether the gypsies were rich. When they did not find anything, they gave up. They took one gypsy girl, they raped her. Well, they left her, and so they went. A young gypsy girl, they hurt her." So the raped young girl survived, though she carried lifelong physical and emotional scars, as she was traumatized for rest of her life. And the survivor attributes the attack to Ukrainians, but it's unclear whether it was carried out by the members of the UPA or just local Ukrainians that targeted minority groups. The subjects of violence against women by Ukrainian nationalists is also present in the testimony of Maria, a woman from Carpathian group. Her father was taken to the forced labor, and her mother was left alone with 9 children. Her oldest sister married right away. She was only 14 years old, to help out the family. So the mother was left at that time with 13 children. And Maria's mother and other Romani women were also forced labor in the area. And they all experienced the gender-based violence. The Ukrainians would beat them at the end of their workday. And Maria also recounts a day that one Ukrainian man, likely a member of the Ukrainian auxiliary police, came to their house and brutally assaulted and beat her on her legs and her mother all over her body with wooden stick. Maria and her mother were both left with severe injuries, and Maria was unable to walk for several days. And that's the quotation, and this is very touching testimony, and I still remember the face of the victim. And the next day, mother, despite the injuries, she went to work because she didn't have any other choice, and said that she was beaten and could not work. When asked by commando who had harmed her, she pointed the man, and it resulted the punishment. The man never returned to their house. However, the other man, another Ukrainian, repeatedly visited their home and was assaulting and beating mother and the children. Afterward, Maria and her cousin were both sent to labor in Leibniz, leaving mother behind with 7 children. And eventually the father reunited with the family, and he took them to Liberec, where he worked in the aircraft factory. And after the war, they reunited, and they returned to their town, but they were still under the threat. So in 1947, they chose to relocate in the west, to the west in search for safety and security. And the last part is the rapes and attempted rapes by Soviet soldiers. And I have to say that the vast majority of the cases that I analyzed were committed by the Soviet soldiers, members of the liberating army. And for these soldiers, women were often perceived as war trophies, and rape became a means of expressing the control and dominance over the newly liberated territories. This disturbing pattern of violence may also have roots in the sexualization and exoticization of Romani women within Russian culture and literature. A Red Army rapes and looting as its troops advanced westward into Central Europe following their victory at the Battle of Stalingrad in February of 1943 is well documented in the research. In the following months of the World War II, the Red Army liberated areas and cities occupied by the Nazis, as well as concentration and extermination camps such as Lublin Majdanek, Gross-Rosen, Auschwitz, and Ravensbrück. And this is a quotation from testimony of member of Polska Roma group. She was eyewitness of murder and rape of young Romani woman, but she does not provide any details, more details. So she just stated, before our eyes, one Romani woman was raped and murdered. Another woman who was a prisoner of Auschwitz and then Ravensbrück concentration camp shared that after liberation, which took place on April 13, 1945, she and 6 other Romani women from Polska Roma group traveled by train to Kielce to return to their families. And among them was a 14-year-old girl who was terrified by the Soviets because right after liberation she was subjected to mass rape by Soviet soldiers. So she was only 14 years old. However, it's also important to acknowledge that kind of testimonies are really rare. And this might be attributed to values and taboos with the traditional Roma families, which often discourage Romani women from discussing their experiences. But there is one experience that was very, very touching. It was a testimony of older Romani woman who during interview became very much distressed and emotional when she was asked about her experiences as a young Romani woman during occupation. She overcome by tears, and then she felt silence, and then she left the room. she was escorted by her son out of the room and out of the camera. And she might have been a victim of sexual abuse, but she did not wanted to talk about the experience publicly. And it was also unclear whether the abuse she endured was at hands of Soviet or other of maybe Nazi Germans. It was very unclear. But her son concluded the interview by explaining that his mother faced health problem and could not discuss such things. So they really didn't want to talk about it. He referred referenced the cultural taboo and emphasized his role as a male head of the family and responsibility of protecting his mother from the potential humiliation of sharing these painful memories. So he was trying to safeguard mother, and unfortunately it was very sad testimony, and the lady was crying very badly. It was very visible that she was really traumatized in the past, and it bring her memories at that time. Another woman, Aniela, who was the Carpathian Roma woman, also remembers the fear from the Soviet soldiers. And that's the story that it's also very traumatizing because she was carrying a son when the Soviet soldier attacked her, and she was trying to fight him and defend herself, and she accidentally dropped the baby on the floor, and the rape took place in the same location when the child was dropped, so at the boy. And the following day the baby had visible bruises, and this woman was very traumatized, but she was determined to seek justice. So she approached the Soviet captain. She complained. She showed her son's injuries as evidence, and she was asked to identify the soldier. She did that, and later on in the testimony, it's revealed that this Soviet captain took steps to address the issue of sexual abuse in the area, and the rape stopped. So at least at that time, the situation was improving. Also, one Roma man in his testimony recounts the role of men who were safeguarding the house, and they were trying to save women from the rapes. And they were just looking if when the Soviet soldiers were approaching, there were women were running to the forest to escape them. And when they approached, they said, "Oh, the women are not here." And another story is a testimony from Maria from Carpathian Roma group. She also says that everyone was afraid to go anywhere. And later, as the Germans passed through and the Russian arrives, we were also fearful of these Russians. Well, we were terribly afraid of this Russian. And when asked about the source of the fear, she replied, "I don't remember anymore. These were also so unpleasant. While some were polite, others were seeking alcohol, and," then she whispered, "raped women. We were also afraid. We were terribly afraid." So she recollects also how the women in the village were terrified by the threat of rape from the Soviet soldiers. And the last story I want to show you is the story of the Roma bands, because the situation with Soviet soldiers also impacted the Roma performances. And there's a man who was a member of the group. He was at that time a young man, and Soviet soldiers were coming to Roma all the time because they wanted to hear the Cossacks, they wanted to hear Romani music and also Russian music. And they were coming under influence of alcohol, and they were partying a lot. And so the Roma didn't want to risk their assaults. So that's why this man was, as youngest, he dressed as a woman, as in Roma dresses. He was dancing with Soviet soldiers. He was trying to act like girl and entertain the Soviet soldiers. And most of them were so drunk that they didn't even notice that this is a young boy and not a girl. And it was just much safer for the band to dress men as a woman than have women perform and risk harming them. So this solution allowed Roma families to prioritize safety and protect wives, daughters, and granddaughters from potential harm. And there's also a story of other performances in other very big settlement of Roma. And in that village, Roma musicians were requested to play the songs and entertain the Soviets. But the situation got very dark because the Soviets were coming at nights, often drunk and armed. And it led to many incidents of violence against Roma women. And during the interview, the interviewer inquired whether this was the reason Roma women from the town refused to participate in the interviews with the Shoah Foundation. And it can be assumed that women who survived the war and still lived in the area didn't want to talk about their experiences. And later on in the testimony, it's revealed that there were only 5 or 6 Romani women in the town, and Soviets would typically arrive in the groups of in the big groups of 3 or 5 tanks. So we know that it were probably the mass rapes in the same town. So, in conclusion, the Polish language testimonies of Roma and Sinti survivors and witnesses of genocide, collected by USC Shoah Foundation Visual History Archive and conducted by dedicated male interviewer, include 23 testimonies directly or indirectly referring to sexual and gender-based violence against Roma and Sinti women during World War II. These testimonies describe 29 cases of rape and attempted rape and gender-based violence. 13 of them represent the cases of attempted rapes, and 6 by Soviet soldiers, and 6 cases of gender-based violence and abuse by Ukrainian nationalists. And 10 represent attempted rapes and gender-based violence abuse by Nazi Germans. Thanks to these testimonies, we know about the brutal acts and violence that were directed to Roma women, primarily by these 3 groups. It's very important to recognize that why the cases were committed by this German and Ukrainian men, they occurred at the beginning of the war, and the Soviet rapes and threats of rapes happened towards the end of the World War II, or during or immediately after the liberation. It's also interesting that although the survivor provide the places, but they do not provide the exact time. They usually say that about the like it was spring or summer, but they don't really bring any particular dates. Only one testimony provides the exact date. And it's also important that that might be because of the fact that the interviews with Roma and Sinti survivors were conducted only in 1997, 1998, which is more than 5 decades after the conclusion of the war. And it could be challenging for Roma survivors to recall every detail of their wartime experiences or what they witness. So, and at that time, many Holocaust survivors already could pass away, so it was not making this any easier. And sexual and gender violence against Roma and Sinti women and girls can be also closely linked to the humanization and violence and the genocidal violence. And this period saw rise of the dehumanization of Roma, also anti-Roma legislation, systematic discrimination, and racism. So Roma women found themselves in very, very bad situation, and they were dehumanized, they were sexualized, not only at the hands of Nazi Germans, Ukrainians, but also by the Soviet soldiers. And this dual discrimination manifested in two ways. First, Romani women were categorized as subhumans, and second, the sexual relations with these women were tragically perceived as spoils of war or even war prizes. And these acts, including the mutilation of Roma women, such as cutting off their breasts and tongues, were also the life force atrocities. So sexual and gender violence, particularly rape against persecuted women, can be traced back to the long centuries process of sexualization, exoticization, and racialization of Roma and Sinti women in Europe. And however, certain crimes might not be directly linked to the process. This is especially exemplified by the fact that some perpetrators subjected the Romani women to the same brutal violence as they did towards Polish and for example, in Ukrainian cases, in non-Ukrainian women in the Volhynia and Eastern Galicia region, as a part of the ethnic cleansing efforts. And many women choose not to disclose their traumatic experiences of sexual abuse due to a combination of internal Romani cultural taboos, feeling of shame, and also humiliation. As a result, most narratives regarding the sexual abuse primarily came from the accounts provided by other Roma individuals rather than directly from the perspective of witnesses. Only women who have escaped rape spoke openly about their experiences. In two cases of elderly Roma women, the rape stories were leaked by their family members sitting next to them during the interview. Perhaps due to trauma, these women did not remember those experiences or did not want to talk about them. And it's also possible that they did not want to tell the stories to male interviewer, who, in addition to being man, was also Gadzio, which was not a non-Roma person. And it should be also emphasized that Romani women were left alone with their trauma, and they could not talk about these horrible experiences with family members and other members of Roma community. In addition, Roma people were and still are the most stigmatized and socially excluded and discriminated against minority in Europe. All these factors contributed to alienation of Roma and Sinti women and girls who were left alone without any internal and external help. Sexual and then gender-based violence against Roma and Sinti women and girls in occupied and later liberated Poland left physical and psychological scars, emotional trauma, and suffering on women and their families, which could do nothing to help them heal. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Do we have more water?
Ask in German. You have the translation right here, and just hold it to your ear or just put it on.
Thank you, Justyna, for your input, and I would kindly ask you to ask questions if you have them. We still have half an hour for questions. Wir haben noch eine halbe Stunde für Fragen.
Is it for sure English? German.
It would be nice if you ask the questions in English, but you can also ask them in German, and they will be translated for Justyna.
German.
David has a question.
Ich mach mal auf Deutsch.
you need the microphone. You will ask in German.
So,
You will hear the English version. Yes. We'll see.
Okay, ja, ich mache das auf Deutsch. Vielen Dank für den Vortrag, sehr berührend. Ich habe mal eine Frage, und zwar, ich war mal mit einer Studie in Belarus und haben auch Interviews durchgeführt mit überlebenden Personen, und ich habe jetzt nicht mehr den Namen drauf, aber ich habe von den Überlebenden auch gehört, dass sie auch in dem KZ-Lager vergewaltigt worden sind von Menschen, die auch inhaftiert waren. Und ich wollte fragen, ob das auch so ist in deiner Studie oder in deiner Ausarbeitungen bis jetzt, ob das solche Vorfälle gekommen sind.
Thank you very much for this question. So I mostly conduct research on occupied Poland, but I have read and also watched and analyzed the testimonies of victims that, eyewitnesses of the sexual assaults in the camps. There is a new book of Ari Yoshkovich, which is titled Rain of Ash, that tells stories of sexual assault in Auschwitz-Birkenau. We also know about some relationships with among the prisoners, and very similar acts of women, survival acts of women that were common in the camps. But in case of Roma women and Roma and Sinti women in the camps, there are definitely stories of the sexual assaults and rapes in the camps, especially in Auschwitz. And I think I was reading recently about the Bełżec. But I will need to. I can if you can leave me your email, I can send it to you because I think I have it in my notes, so I could help you with that.
Thank you so much for your presentation again. I would like to ask, because you mentioned this story where men would dress up as women, and I wonder if you have any record of acts of solidarity from other Romani women, like among Romani women, because I can imagine this is a place where you could talk about it and where you could find support.
No, so in case of that, I have only one story that was shared by the daughter who was eyewitness of rape of her mother. But mostly the stories come from the other Roma, but usually not related, or like not, as we say, related, like very closely related. But in case of this, the band stories are really, really interesting. So. I don't know even how they could come up with this solution to dress these young boys as women, and they had it's all pretty much explained in the interview. So they explain how Romani women would bring them their skirts, they would give them their earrings, like everything. They had all full stuff, full jewelry, the outfits. They could dance. They dance in the Roma women moves. And then the Soviet soldiers would not notice that, which is genius idea. And he this one survivor said that he actually they would touch him. They could like slap him or like try to have some interaction with him, but he was just he was not that much assaulted. It was not that bad for him as it would be for and consequences for women would be much more serious. So they just dance, and then after the performance, they would the concert was done, and then men could return home, and then women were also in hiding at that time. So they were at this when the Soviets approached. Roma women were hiding in the attics, in the forest. They would try to avoid any contact with the Soviets, especially in these Carpathian mountain areas.
Ja, vielen Dank, Justyna. Ja, vielen Dank für deinen Vortrag. Ich habe mir einen Kommentar, aber vielleicht auch eine Bitte noch an dich. Also, wenn ich dir so zugehört habe, ist der Eindruck, eigentlich gab es für Romja und Sinti gar keinen sicheren Ort in dieser Zeit. Also in diesen Kriegszeiten, die du beschreibst, weil im Grunde jede Gruppe von Männern gefährlich werden konnte. Also das hat sich, das ist für mich so das Bewegende an dem Vortrag gewesen. Das ist so krass. Mhm. Das ist, und jetzt, was David auch noch sagte, auch im Lager gab es die Übergriffe durch andere Häftlinge. Also das ist wirklich, also sehr bewegend. Und wir fragen uns dann ja natürlich, also womit hat das zu tun? Und du hast das ein wenig angedeutet, dass es auch mit der Geschichte von Romja und Sinti zu tun hat, also vor allen Dingen mit der Geschichte, wie Gadje auf uns schauen. Also was sind die Bilder, was sind die Ideen von Romja, von Sinti, also von Frauen und Mädchen aus den Communities, die eben auch dazu führen, dass es keine sicheren Orte gibt vor sexuellen Übergriffen, vor dieser sexualisierten Gewalt, die du beschrieben hast. Vielleicht hast du Lust dazu noch ein wenig was zu erzählen.
Mm. Thank you very much, Jay, for this question. It's very it made me think about it, right? I mean, you made me think about it right now even more than I did in my 51 pages paper. And but you are right, there was never a safe space, and even in the areas that there are some stories actually of the Roma who were hiding in the forest, and there were partisans that were led by the Soviet Roma, and they actually said that the women were safe there because the Roma would really protect them. But in many cases, men would just run to the forest or like try to also, they were afraid of their own lives. The men would be afraid of their own lives, so they left women, and women could not run with the children, and with they needed to be responsible for the children, so they could not escape that easily, and so they were in much in worse situation. And I also felt in many situations in my research when I was analyzing these cases that in many cases I felt like the women were betrayed by also Roma men, because they were left in in the one case with the band is prime example. It's okay, it was solution, family came up with solution, but in many cases they were men just escaped and they left women. They would not protect women. So in this perspective, I feel like they were betrayed. And it's also evident in the way the interviewer, the male interviewer, is conducting the interviews. I do not believe that these women were so were ready to openly discuss all this issue with him. And the big part of the testimonies of Roma are also the questions about the fate of the Jews. So the testimonies are often like kind of like turning to the Jewish topic, and it's not fully about the Roma. And in case of the Jewish testimonies, we have full Jewish stories, and it's the topic of Roma and Sinti. It's really rare in them. So and that's also the ownership of the. So most of the testimonies and the archives, which contain the materials, the archives of Roma, are owned by the bigger, mostly Jewish organizations. So we do not, as Roma and Sinti, I do not feel like we have power over our Holocaust representation or Holocaust discourse. I really appreciate what you're guys doing here in Germany, because I really love the memorial, and I love the educational materials. I'm in this Alfreda Markowska project, which I feel it's awesome and it's very much needed. But in many cases there is no knowledge of Roma. I teach at the State University in the United States, and my students mostly do not know who we are, and they have no idea that we were victims of the Nazi persecution. And that's the big issue with the education system, and with the fact that we have been very much marginalized, and we are still marginalized in this Holocaust discourse. And women are at the end of this process at all. We are not included in that. So that's why this research is so important. I hope I answered your question a little bit.
Gibt es noch?
Dziękuję Pani mocno. Ale będę mówiła też po niemiecku. Also ich werde auch Deutsch sprechen, weil ich glaube, zum einen interessiert mich, wie die Reaktion in Polen ist auf dieses Thema, ob das überhaupt, also Sie arbeiten ja, Sie haben Ihre Ausbildung auch in Polen, wie die Reaktion dort ist. Wenn ich mir das mit meiner Heimatstadt Berlin vergleiche, obwohl mich die Thematik interessiert und ich seit sehr vielen Jahren mich mit jüdischer Geschichte auch beschäftigt habe, aber ich habe noch nie einen solchen Vortrag gehört und bin froh, dass ich hier bin. Es wird ganz selten über Romnja und Sintice gesprochen, sondern wenn, dann über die ganze Community, und dann fällt sowas runter. Und ich könnte mir vorstellen, so wie ich Polen kenne, ich bin Slawistin in der Erstausbildung, es ist nicht gerade ein Lieblingsthema, um damit in die Öffentlichkeit zu gehen. Also wie sieht das dort aus?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you very much for your kind words, and dziękuję bardzo za miłe słowa. And yes, and I actually I do my research on occupied Poland, but I do not live in Poland anymore. And this article is going to be published at the Haifa University in Israel, which is the main Holocaust. One of the greatest Holocaust journals. But in Poland, we are in a very interesting situation right now, politically and also in case of Roma community. So I hope my paper will be viewed as useful in Poland, but I'm not sure if the Roma community will be that much interested. It's usually for the scholars who are who are doing research on Roma, and we have more and more Roma scholars, which is really important for the Romani studies. But there are also we have some issues with education. Only 1% of Roma are educated, and we have yearly about 40 students, only 40 students in all Poland, Roma students, which is really not that much. And so I don't even know if Roma people would be interested in my paper in many scenarios. But I'm glad that I will bring it up, and I also would like to share these stories of women, of their bravery and also their traumatic experience, because I feel like it's, as you said, there's a lot of research on Roma. We talk about Roma in general, but there's not that much about women, and the experience of women is especially close to my heart. And because in Poland we are so diverse groups, we have Kalderash, we have Lowary, we have Polska Roma, we have Sinti, we have Ruska Roma, we have few groups, and we're so diverse. So I'm not sure if that will be great feedback from the Roma groups. That's why I also I'm not talking about the names of the victims, because I do not want to offend anyone, any family. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question about the interview context. As you said, as you mentioned, it was a bit problematic, the situation that it was conducted by a non-Roma person and a male person. Do you know how it came? And do you know, like for the context, if there was offered help or therapeutic help after the interviews? Or I've just come about the term last week, scientific extractivism, which I didn't hear before. So like scientists come to a peer group and ask questions and leave them afterwards. It sounds a bit like that, but maybe you have more context.
So I wish my great-grandmother would be alive for the interview time, but from my town, from my family town, where my Roma family lives, there were only 2 testimonies conducted. And we were not aware of them, actually. I only discovered when I had access to the archives. And the USC Shaw Foundation gained interest in the Roma experience, Roma and Sinti experience, after Steven Spielberg was making a movie, The Schindler List. And then he became more and more interested in the experience of Roma, and that's why they conducted, oh my goodness, they conducted the testimonies with Roma, this I feel like it was, as you said, they were still left with no hope. I know that they received, the family members received the cassette with the testimony, and that's basically it. And some testimonies are open, they are available openly, and some of them are only for the research purpose. And there's also many. I was recently at the Holocaust conference, and I've heard a lot of interesting opinions about Roma testimonies, because they are different than other testimonies. You can tell that they're much different, mostly because at the end of the testimonies, usually Roma perform. They all come and sing. And in case of Jewish testimonies, we have one person that sits in usually like beautiful chair, and there is one-on-one conversation. There is like very silent room. Nobody's there. In case of Roma testimonies, whole family is gathered there. The children are there. They're all very loud. And the person is telling the story, and then there are like people around. There are like women, there are like grandchildren coming, and then they're all prepared to sing and dance. So you can hear the instruments, you can see the violin, you can hear the violin, and then at the end they finally perform, they're very happy to perform. But these performances are mostly the moments I was crying the most, because they usually sing, and then the Holocaust survivor is also emotional, and they see, like, you can tell that they lost all of the family members. There's one Holocaust survivor, but this Holocaust survivor already have their children and 10 grandchildren, and they all look the same, and they're so beautiful. They have these traditions. The children are already dancing and singing in Romani language. So it always, my heart is growing at that time, like, okay, we survive. And it's always a beautiful moment. But yeah, I feel like they were left with no help after interviews. And there are not that many interviews with Roma. So we have to work what we have, but still these pieces, these testimonies are great material, and we can get some knowledge. Because from many pogroms that took place in occupied Poland, as I mentioned, there are 167 documented pogroms, and we are still finding the remains. We don't know how many survivors there were. In most cases, all Roma families, all, like, we call it tabor, which was the caravan, all of them were murdered. So we cannot get to know their stories anymore. But in case of, especially the experience of Roma women was, it's actually unknown, and that's why it's so important, and it really stuck with me. And I couldn't sleep at night. I had nightmares thinking about women. And none of these testimonies really, I researched the Auschwitz-Birkenau, which is the largest camp, and none of the stories were, like, so painful like the experience of women. So yeah, thank you.
I was wondering how the women cope with the trauma and the experience that they made, and I feel like you might already touched on that by that they perform and sing and dance, and I am aware it's probably not the focus of your research, but I'm just wondering if you could, maybe have an idea or could say something about it. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. So in most cases, we can get to know, especially with the in case of the rape that resulted the pregnancy of woman, we know that she shared with her sister, and then sister, when she had already Alzheimer and then dementia, the sister told the story, and then she explained it. But I feel like women were talking about this experience only with the closest family members, or sometimes they couldn't talk to anyone. In, like, more orthodox, like, traditional families, they probably had nobody to talk to. And I feel like it's very much similar. It could be similar to the experiences of German women after the Battle of Berlin, because there were also many women who were hurt, and there were many also situations that they were trying to escape the rape. Yeah, they were dressing badly. They were putting some stuff on their faces, so they are not attractive for the soldiers. But they were also left kind of alone with that. Yeah, the research on that also started late. So I feel like it all after the war, the women experience was kind of the last experience that we researched. Everybody focused on compensations, on the Cold War, what the territory will look like, who will have power over what. But the survivors, the DP camps, the immigration of the Jews to the United States, then the establishment of the State of Israel, it all it became forgotten, the experience of women. So I feel like in many cases of women who experienced the rape, they were not willing to talk about it, and they look like they don't want to remember that. They didn't want to talk about it. They were like this is story. This is done. This this never happened to me, but I'm glad that some of them shared, and we can have this research.
Ja, ich habe auch mehr noch einen Kommentar. Ja. Ich weiß, also es gibt die Arbeiten von Gabriele Rosenthal zum Beispiel, die auch aufdeckt, dass auch in jüdischen Communities sexualisierte Gewalt lange Zeit tabuisiert war. Also dass auch das Sprechen da dort auch lange Zeit nicht möglich war oder vielleicht auch nie möglich war. Und du hast angesprochen, dass hier, also dass zum Beispiel in Berlin diese Vergewaltigungen nach der Befreiung, also dass das der Fall war. Ich wollte nur dazu noch sagen, also das ist zumindest ja dann auch relativ spät, aber es ist ja zumindest angesprochen worden, öffentlich geworden. Aber wie die eine Zuhörerin jetzt gerade sagte, das, was du uns heute erzählt hast, das ist für viele, also auch für mich jetzt in dem Fall, tatsächlich das erste Mal. Und das müssen wir uns auch mal klar machen. Wir haben 2023, fast 2024. Und wenn es um die Frage von Trauma geht, Trauma kann ja noch sehr viel schlechter überwunden werden, wenn es überhaupt nicht anerkannt wird. Und das scheint mir ja hier der Fall zu sein. Also sowohl für die Regionen, die du untersucht hast, aber auch in Deutschland auch. Es ist ja auch der Punkt. Sinti und Romja lebten zum Beispiel weiterhin im Land der Täterinnen in Deutschland. Und der Völkermord, der Genozid war ja der Samudaripen und da jetzt fällt mir das Wort schon gar nicht mehr ein. Ja, ich bin nicht drauf. Genau. Ist ja bis 82 gar nicht thematisiert worden, ist bis heute kaum thematisiert. Und das Thema, was du heute vorgetragen hast, ist gar nicht thematisiert, würde ich sagen, bisher. Ja. Also das ist mehr so ein Kommentar nochmal zu dieser Gesamtsituation, die einfach sehr erschütternd ist.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Jane. I'm sorry that I put the German women experience in the same area, but I'm teaching my students about the Battle of Berlin, and in my class about sexual abuse, I don't want to show German people as the perpetrators only, but I want to also show the resistance of German people. And also I teach about the Battle of Berlin and experience of women, and we are watching testimonies of German women. So I know that it has been addressed, but I feel like it was still later. And for us, it's as you said, it's almost 2024, and we just work on that right now, which is late. But and there is one book about sexual abuse against Romani women in Transnistria, and it's by Michelle Kello. It's the researcher. She actually wrote a book about that. So that will be article, but it's still something that we're moving forward to spread the knowledge about our experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justyna. I would like to have another round of applause for this very important talk today. So it is my turn, unfortunately, to end this discussion at this point, and I'm very grateful for you to also break the silence. And I've been thinking a lot about silencing and all the mechanisms of it, and you've also talked about these in your presentation, and I thought maybe this is how we can also frame this university lecture as a place where silences can be broken about Romani feminist realities, Romani feminist knowledge, Romani women's experiences. So again, my gratefulness to Jane, Svetlana, and Isidora, and the archive I'm part of that was capable to do that. And by saying so, I would kindly invite you for the next event, which will be on 9th of January 2024, again here and online. And please have in mind all the great Romani women that you were able to see, and read them and promote them and invite them. And have a good passing into the new year. I don't know how you say that. Have a good New Year's Eve. Thank you.